I could write an op-ed saying Hamas is right. You couldn't do anything about it. I couldn't be jailed. There could be no legal consequences for that. So,
and you think that right should be extended to non-citizens?
Yes. This is important. The First Amendment does not say, here is a class of people who have this right. The First Amendment says...
I'm going to ask a direct question.
Okay. Uh-oh.
There is this sentiment right now on the right, which is why all of a sudden we need to give a shit about the rule of law when for the better half of the last decade, it seems like the Constitution was in the trash while entire LATAM was infiltrating our border. There was no rule of law back then. No one was talking about it, and we were not allowed to question it. And now, all of a sudden, people are getting deported. People who are not citizens are getting deported. And now we have to give a shit about the Constitution and the rule of law? What say you?
That is the dominating, prevailing sentiment on the right. Look, I think this is a very quintessential, it's the Boromir moment, right?
I don't know what that means.
That's from The Lord of the Rings.
Oh.
They're all sitting around, and the ring is presented, and Boromir very famously says, the weapon of the enemy, it is a gift to us. We must use it for our own defense.
Yeah.
And they conclude that, no, that is incorrect. They have to destroy the weapon of the enemy, not use the weapon of the enemy. That is what I would say.
That's a great comparison, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's what I would say to people on the right. Like, we have this unique, totally unprecedented opportunity where Republicans control every branch of government and have a majority on the Supreme Court. You can actually pass legislation to defund or decrease or get rid of the institutions that have bedeviled us for so long. If what you instead choose to do is empower or build up these institutions or make the bureaucracies more entrenched, then when you lose power in 2 years or 4 years or lose partial power, all that's going to get used against you again. I don't want to hear any complaints. I think it would be such a mistake to do things in a reckless fashion, in an executive order-based fashion. That can be done away with the stroke of a pen, with the next executive order. So not everything they're doing on that level I necessarily disagree with, but I think my broad criticism of the last couple of months is, Elon Musk is identifying great examples of waste, fraud, and abuse, in my mind, to get rid of, but then they're not actually using Congress to get rid of it. So it'll just come back into existence. With the deportations and all that stuff, look, I understand there's a mandate, clearly, to get rid of to dramatically reduce illegal immigration, to get rid of violent gang members or terrorist-affiliated, Tren de Aragua, MS-13, all that stuff. We got to do that. Sure, they should be doing that. I think if they did it with just even slightly more precision, it would not be engendering so much pushback from the courts.
So instead of the obvious scalpel approach, this is more of a bull in the china shop approach. What say you to someone, and like you said, it was a mandate for the administration to follow through with mass deportation. I think majority of Americans were in favor of at least figuring it out. Okay, what is going on right now with the fact that so many people are in the country illegally? I live 10 minutes away from the Roosevelt Hotel in Manhattan, so I see it every day. So given the fact that was a predominant desire in the country for that to happen, and now the vibe has kind of shifted only because the whole thing wasn't done well. So if you had to consult the administration, is it an issue of executing well, or do they need to soft land the approach?
I am worried that their approach could apply just to anyone, to American citizens, right? They have
Can you lay that down a little bit?
Well, they could please try to set me at ease.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I'm not hostile to everything the Trump administration is doing. I don't have Trump derangement system.
Set me at ease.
But I like due process, and I'm not ashamed or afraid to admit it.
Yeah.
I like free speech. If they're saying, once they're out of the country, there's nothing we can do. They're in another country.
El Salvador, yeah.
Well, how does that not apply to American citizens as well?
Hey guys, I've been working in politics for almost 10 years now. I worked in Fox. I worked with people like Sagar and Jetty, Tucker. It's been a wild ride, and now I'm super stoked that I can interview and talk to my friends who were responsible for, me having a job in politics. And I hope you guys like this. If you do, let me know. Subscribe, like, share, all of that good stuff. I'm not monetizing any of this because I want everybody to have just a good experience consuming this content. TLDR, Thank you, and keep watching.
Let's say you accidentally put an American citizen on a deportation flight and send him elsewhere, send him to somewhere that doesn't want to easily give them back, and you say, well, we should have done that, but well, they're not in America, so sorry, we don't. This only applies to people who are in America. They're not really explaining how that would be different. Do you know what I mean?
No.
Like they'll say the logic they're applying to the guy, the El Salvador case that has
Kilmar
Brego Garcia, the case that we're talking about so much. Look, I get it. I get their argument. He is from El Salvador.
Yeah.
He is now back in El Salvador. Is he a Maryland man or an El Salvador man? I get it. I still think they should, per that judge's orders, that he could be deported anywhere but El Salvador. I don't know why they wouldn't just get him back and then deport him elsewhere. And then they could say, then that'd be fine. He does not, I accept the government's evidence that he is probably a member of MS-13 or was at one point. I'm not contesting that. I am not contesting the desire to get those people out of our country. That's fine by me too. They could do it in like a slightly
I'm gonna re-ask my first question once again, because as soon as you say that he's a man from El Salvador, the right's response right now is, hey, he came here illegally, and so did millions of people for the better half of the last decade, and we did not give a shit about the Constitution and the rule of law back then. Why should we right now, given the premise that he came here illegally?
Well, but how do we know unless we use a due process based process to figure out like who came here illegally, right? You can't just, you have to actually have a process.
I hate that even
to figure out that who's, to.
I hate that I even have to ask you this. Like, can you define what due process is and what it means?
Yeah, there should be some. I mean, it's different in every case, and I'm not arguing that he didn't have due process. He did have a process. There's not. That's kind of silly when media people will first say, "Oh, he's such a wonderful father, so that's what should matter." What about the due process? No, there was a process, and at the culmination of that process, they said the court said he can be deported, just not to El Salvador. So the enforcement should just be consistent with that process. We need to. I don't like the idea of people, even the Columbia student or the pro-Palestinian or anti-Israel sentiment. If the process is, we are revisiting your visa status and we think you should be exiting the country in a certain amount of time, okay. If it's, we are grabbing people off the street and sending them to a detention facility, even though they've not been accused of crimes, I don't know, man. That seems kind of not great to me. I get off. I'm getting off the train at that point. Because we know, and this is so reminiscent to me of the post 9/11 patriotic fervor. Isn't this like a freedom fries
for
vibe?
The youths? Can you just give us the flashback?
So that time period, if you go back to that time period, I was in high school. It was the beginning of high school, and it was just like a rah. If you're not with us, you're with the terrorists. If you're questioning anything the government is doing, you are a supporter of Islamic extremism. You want Americans to die. We're gonna put our boot up your ass kind of mindset that gave the government total power and permission to do whatever they want and to enshrine the Patriot Act and domestic surveillance and the TSA, all sorts of programs for our safety that if anyone questioned at the time, you were explicitly accused of being on the side of terrorists. Now, 20 years later, even many of the people who pushed those policies, right and left, broadly speaking, we now kind of all understand to varying degrees that was a huge mistake, that we regret doing a lot of those things in terms of the nation building we did in the Middle East, in terms of the violations of our own civil liberties. Airport security has not made us safer one iota. It's just the worst hassle we all have to go through. That all of that, the license we gave to the government to violate our civil liberties in a moment of fear about terrorism was really, really bad. And I see this feels a little similar to me because illegal immigration is a crisis. I agree it's bad. We should try to address it. But we shouldn't address it in what a due process? We don't even care about that. You will regret that. You will come to regret that stance very, very soon,
I think
my
it's
friends.
the good old Rahm Emanuel code, like never let a good crisis go to waste.
Oh, for sure.
And they're definitely not letting it go to waste. Speaking of El Salvador, what do you think, what do you make of that whole dynamic? Because as of now, it seems like El Salvador's prisons are just like a subcontractor of the U.S. judicial/prison system. What is the logic behind sending illegals, or as it turns out, people from the States, in a jail in a different country.
Yeah, I think the administration likes the tough guy optics of it. It has made Bukele I mean, we have to be clear, he's a liked political figure, that he has resolved an actual crisis in his country, a crisis of violence and gangs. You know, what do you do in a crisis of that magnitude, in a failed state? What measures are appropriate to take, even if it results in insane violations of civil liberties? You know, that's a question for the people of El Salvador. I guess this is what they want. This is what they support. I can't imagine doing something like that here. I certainly don't want to send American citizens to this prison, or even some of the people we're deporting. It's like, it's one thing to deport someone back to where they came from, but if I know I'm sending them to indefinite detention in a horrific dungeon, I'm coming across as such like a soft.
I know
I'm not really a softie.
I know, like we sound so lib here, but at the same time,
I'm cringing at how lib I sound. But
no, I've hated myself for like even like thinking of these arguments, because if you think about it, Obama deported a shit ton of people.
Sure.
He was a deportation in chief guy, whatever. I totally get it, but
and
I'm pretty
we only care
sure
about kids in cages when it's Trump's
that's
cages.
fine, but I'm pretty sure Obama wasn't sending like Venezuelans to like Guatemala or whatever.
It's like the right takes the dial and always dials it up to 11 on every single effing thing. Some things, a 7 would be perfectly appropriate. Some things like you know, pardoning people involved in January 6th, a 2 would have been appropriate, and we had to do an 11. You know, on like undoing COVID overreach or whatever, I'm as insanely right-wing as anyone else. Not that this is a big subject.
Yeah.
Let's go 11. That's fine. On dialing back our neoconservative-esque foreign policy, I'm with that. And again, I know we have to do something about illegal immigration, but does that mean we have to round up everyone and send them to this horrible, horrific?
Also, like, what is this premise though? Like, if you're setting the premise that, hey, we want to deport illegal aliens and or just people who are here on visas, what have you, and the people who we are rounding up are people who are writing essays for their respective schools, colleges, thesis, what have you, and they are taking side with Israel or not taking side with the Israel, and that somehow becomes the deciding factor.
Yeah, I think that one is even more obviously bad, because this is, you know, and what the State Department has said to justify this is just totally unpersuasive to me. They're like, this is contrary to our national security to have, students writing op-eds or protesting against Israel. Well, first of all, it's another country's security, not our security. Second of all, and I do not agree with the pro-Palestinian activists.
Hamas,
I think they are.
That's fine,
I have accused them of being on the side of Hamas many times.
Yeah.
I think their antics are actually turn people off from their cause. But let's take that to its logical conclusion then. Let's say I'm the most pro-Israel person there is. I think I would very much want the pro-Hamas students to keep protesting, to keep writing op-eds, because
they will expose themselves for who they are.
Cause. Yeah. So even if your goal is totally in lockstep with Israel, I am not sure I would take this position of trying to get rid of these people from the country. I think I would let them cook, because I think it turns people off from their message. So I disagree with them tactically, and then I disagree with them on there is a debate on both the left and even on the right about how much support we should give to Israel in terms of the actually financial support, weapons support. The policy there is a legitimate topic of debate, I think, just as Russia-Ukraine is a legitimate topic of debate, how much we support Ukraine, how much we press for them to sue for peace. I can't imagine, what if we were deporting like pro-Russian, Russian people on visas or something for saying Ukraine should surrender and end the war? Like, I think Republicans would recognize that's crazy. So this is a similar.
Somehow this one country is like our Achilles heel, but that's a whole different can of worms. And
I'm not like some weird,
it's
insane anti-Israel person by any stretch of the imagination.
Like, you don't need to be quote unquote anti-Semitic to be, questioning what's going on right now.
Like the lady who went to the funeral for one of them, and that's fine. They stopped her from coming back into the country. Yeah, that's fine. She doesn't have, because she was not in the country, and you can stop her from coming in. That's fine to me.
I mean, okay, so as someone, when I moved to this country, you have to actually go through the system where you disclose your affiliations, your ties, what have you. Mm-hmm. And I totally agree that how that system needs to be tough, arguably tougher. However, once like the people who are here, especially people who are not affiliated with violent protests and everything that the administration wants to establish, why are you like targeting again kids who are writing essays in colleges? Which brings us to like this whole Harvard situation. It pains me to take Harvard's side in this issue, especially given the fact how absurd Harvard has been on all things free speech leading up to, last year. What have you made of how Harvard has been pushing back to Trump regarding the free speech issue?
I think it is important to remind everyone that the federal government putting pressure on universities to change whatever policies is not new whatsoever. Trump is doing, as is his habit, loudly and in public what the last several presidents, including on the Democratic side, have done. So I want to remind everyone that the Obama administration in 2011 sent guidance to not just Harvard, but actually every college and university, every school in the country, telling them that under Title IX, a federal statute that mandates gender-based non-discrimination in schools, they had to completely overhaul their sexual misconduct adjudication policies in ways that violate due process in such obvious that they had to no longer have lawyers for the accused, that it would be a preponderance of the evidence standard. It was just Kafka-esque, like Alice in Wonderland, Looney Tunes court. I'm using a bunch of mixed metaphors there. It in fact engendered a pushback from the law faculty of Harvard. There was dozens of them who signed an open letter saying this, what Obama is making Harvard do, violates due process and free speech because it had speech components. Because even then professors who spoke out against this new Title IX Inquisition, they got investigated for retaliation and harassment under the insanely broad interpretation that this was the Obama team. Obama made and threatening federal funding the same way. If you didn't do this, you could lose your federal funding. Exact same thing. And no institution, not a single school, stood up to Obama and then Biden when he did the same thing. No one fought for due process and free speech in the face of federal attacks. And so now Trump is doing, similar things. I don't think... Let me put it this way. I don't know that giving tons of money to a very rich and elite institution.
Can we just question the basics real quick?
That's what I question.
Can you explain how the whole endowment and the federal funding system works vis-a-vis U.S. college taking money from U.S. government?
Yeah, so this is largely research funding that taxpayer dollars being given to the universities in terms of research funding. And then there's also subsidization in the form of the student loans program. Yeah. And if you want to find something to get rid of, in my view, we should target that because that has both, it's raised the cost. There is a scientific evidence, there are studies showing that most of the tuition increase over time is directly tied to the loan subsidization program, which makes perfect sense. Yeah. If you say, you're going to give me money to go to college, and whatever it costs, you're going to pay for it. And then I'm going to have to pay you back later, but don't worry about that too much. Good deal for me. But the college will just say, okay, well, then it costs $1 trillion. And you're like, okay, here's the $1 trillion. And then now I'm going to be in debt to you years later. But it doesn't matter to the college. If you're paying the cost, and it's guaranteed as well, they can just keep jacking up the price.
Oh, and by the way, I can also declare bankruptcy.
Right. Yeah. Right. So they have a safe bet to keep raising the price. Honestly, I'm not like for price controls or something, but but in this case, I would be, because if you're subsidizing this directly and you're not putting any limit on the one who's receiving the money or setting some fixing of their price, they can just raise the price forever, which is what's happening. So it's crazy. So I would also it promotes endless credentialism and seeking more and more elite expensive degrees that are totally not supported by the market anymore, that are not like, there are jobs for, massively indebted liberal arts grads in some of these absolute BS programs. But we're subsidizing it. The market would clear some of this out, but we're subsidizing it.
However, Trump's reason for going after them is not that.
Not that.
That's a whole different issue. Instead, it is about the fact that you are not letting conservative opinions flourish, which may have its validity.
Oh, it's certainly
However,
validity.
especially if you're going after regarding the whole anti-Semitism argument, that's a whole different can of worms.
Yeah, I mean, if they had done this, let's say Trump was in power, a couple of years before the
BLM rights.
before for Harvard specifically, before the admissions decision, right? 4 years, Harvard and other institutions have just discriminated racially against particularly Asian applicants to be Harvard students, and the Supreme Court told them to stop doing that. I think you could have had a perfectly persuasive case for saying Harvard is in violation of federal non-discrimination law and is going to lose its funding unless they change that policy. But that policy was already struck down by the Supreme Court. So I think the case for doing that was weaker. They point to some of the DEI type stuff that I find, toxic and bad, and maybe under some circumstances, training modules that are comport with DEI might constitute a sort of racial discrimination or racial harassment. It's real junk when you look at these programs closely. But that's kind of getting into the weeds of Harvard's own business, where, a lot of the Trump administration people, they're used to being contrarian, right-wing dissident people complaining about these institutions. And I agree with them. I also am kind of a contrarian, dissident person complaining about these institutions. But once you are actually the government and then you're using government power to make them do stuff, then it's like
you are the elite.
My sympathy starts to tip the other way.
Yeah, because you are no longer quote unquote punching up.
Right.
Because you are the government. What do you think of the vibe shift? Because I was thinking about this morning. Leading up to the election, there were so many conversations about the vibe shift and how the country's vibe is shifting because of all the nonsense regarding all the DI stuff. However, the thing about vibe shift is that it can shift again.
Yeah.
And as of now, there are talking points like the woke right and how the right kind of has its own little pearl clutchy DEI adjustments. If you had to take the temperature of the country right now, especially given the fact that Trump is losing ground with people who won previously, which is young men and Latinos, by the way, and he's losing ground there. What does that make you feel about how the mood is changing, and what do you think it might look like come midterms?
I mean, I think it's too soon to say that there's already going to be some shift back. And we live under a system of thermostatic public opinion,
Can you
right?
explain that?
Is that what they call it?
Yeah.
Basically, it just oscillates wildly back and forth. That whoever wins the election, immediately the clock is ticking for them. Public opinion moves back the other way. We're plus 5R, and then a couple weeks later, we're plus 5D. That's just kind of we ping pong in the middle. As the political parties or political movements have really become more competitive and more efficient over time, it actually makes sense to have it pretty down the middle, and then have one side overreach slightly and the other side play to their own strengths and pick up. We're a small number of people in the middle, persuadable, come back the other way, and then get pulled back this way. Can you even imagine ever again? And we never know, it could happen, but the kinds of blowout elections they used to have. Ronald Reagan won 49 of 50 states in 1984. Nixon did that. Johnson did that. 49 of 50 states, 60% of the popular vote. That's crazy. It's never going to happen again because the parties are too in a
polar.
Good way. They're actually competitive. Yeah. They're two grand chess masters at the height of their game, and you're going to win one, and then I'm going to win one, and then you're going to win one, and then I'm going to win one.
What do you think happened? What changed?
Well, it's kind of a gaming thing, right? If you play, I play a lot of competitive board games.
Okay.
I'm a nerd guy. And the first couple times you
play... I love how adding competitive informative board games make it not a board game. It's still a board game.
Well, I don't mean... No, I don't mean Monopoly.
Okay.
It's not...
You mean Made Up Lord of the Rings board games? Okay.
No, like Settlers of Catan is a gateway game to other things.
Gotcha.
Monopoly's a stupid game. Risk is a stupid game. And I played years of it, but there are better games out there. It's too luck-based.
Okay.
Too much rolling of dice. But... my point is, the first couple times you play one of these games, you screw up, you goof off, you don't understand it well. But once everyone has played the game enough, chess is like this, how does the horsey move? Oh, wait, that was stupid. But if you get really good at it and you're playing someone who's really good at it,
you can gamify it.
You just don't make those mistakes anymore. It usually ends in a draw, in fact, right? At the elite level of play, they'll play 1 million games and most of them will be a draw because they're really good at it.
Yeah.
So that's the political system. It is a game. Winning winning elections is a sort of game, and both sides have figured out the optimal strategy, which is now fighting over a handful of the 3 swing states that have a high population and thus are good electoral victories, or put a lot of electoral votes into your column and are competitive: Michigan, Pennsylvania, etc. There's no one is trying to, campaign in states that they know they're already going to win. But that's a new development.
Yeah.
That they didn't just try to win as many of the votes as they could everywhere. Like, that's the strategy Bush ran. Bush wanted to win the popular vote. He was campaigning everywhere. Now we know you're just going to concentrate on the ones that actually matter.
The only way and something like that changes if there is something like, knock on wood, 9/11 or post-Nixon, because once again, we talked about 9/11, but after 9/11...
But COVID was a 9/11 of sorts, and we remamed just
50-50,
as partisan, political. That did not produce some
because it's
unity.
so reactionary. Because if you think about like what the right is doing right now, arguably the left did post-COVID, vis-a-vis mask mandates, school mandates, and it all comes down to which party can justify how they take away quote-unquote personal rights and encroach on civil libertarianism. What do you think is the state of people who just want to be left alone?
Well, I hope we have a powerful constituency out there. I think that is very American at its core.
That's the whole point,
just
though.
Leave us alone kind of phenomenon. I am a libertarian. I never make the mistake of saying things that I believe in or are good policy or good ideas are necessarily popular. That is a trap that I see too many pundits fall into. So I don't want to say that, like, I think we should do something about entitlements. I would actually, yes, like to gut not just the welfare system, but like Medicare and Social Security. Absolutely. I believe it's a transfer of wealth from healthy young people who have the system rigged against them in many different ways to much comparatively wealthy, older, privileged people. I hate boomers. They've rigged the whole system in their favor.
And that's why we'll never own a house.
Crusading warfare. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's impossible for us to own houses because of the rules they've set up. So I am for doing those things. But I know that privatizing Social Security is not popular. I don't. Should Republicans adopt that policy? No, it would probably cause them to lose support, even though I think it is a good thing to do. So the things I think are right are not necessarily popular. So I never want to overstate any kind of case. But I think a lot of Americans do have a basic libertarian vibe, a live and let live, a leave me alone, that is a good thing. That we care a lot about our rights. We're very skeptical, especially on free speech. I mean, the things you can't say and do in even civilized countries in Europe is insane to me.
Yeah, we talked about Germany last time.
When we're reminded of, like, oh my God, they confiscate people's electronics for telling like racist jokes on Facebook. That is genuinely insane to me
here,
that they can do that anywhere but the U.S. basically.
And once if they're questioned about it, they would just like, oh yeah, that's exactly what we do.
Yes.
Yeah.
They said, well, we have to protect you from hate, from extremism. It's so paternalistic. It's so patronizing. But the issue is, everything is now a national issue, I think.
Yeah.
The news media has become a national. We have one national news media. The local journalism has declined. And now it's like everything that happens might as well be a national issue for us all to argue about.
Yeah.
Social media has contributed to that too. Whereas it could be like maybe just people in your local community can care about this, and this is really not my business. Well, now it is my business because we're all talking about it all the time.
Let's quickly do a pulse check on the other side. What have you made on the brouhaha tour of AOC and Bernie, which I'm actually impressed by because I was thinking about how there's a white space of a liberal Green Party, Tea Party. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the energy they are tapping into and doing a good job at it.
No, I'm going to say about them what they said about me and the Tea Party. No, it's all AstroTurf. It's all George Soros. It's just all evil socialist billionaires paying for it. Those are fake people. It doesn't even exist. It doesn't look like anything to me. No, I'm being facetious, but that is exactly what they said about the Tea Party.
Tea Party, yeah.
No, yeah, it is impressive. I mean, Bernie Sanders has always been able to tap into genuine emotion and support, and there is an interest in him. AOC is a savvier political operator than some on the right give her credit for. They're reacting to her policies, which they think are insane, and I frankly also think are insane. But that does not mean she is ineffective or untalented as a
Politician.
She also has enough self-awareness that she is trying to understand the phenomenon in her own district where there are people who voted for her and voted for Trump, right? She did like an Instagram at like, hey, you follow me on Instagram, you live in my district. If you voted for Trump but you voted for me, tell me why. Like, she actually was trying to understand that phenomenon. She was one of the first people to take pronouns out of her bio after Kamala Harris lost. That suggests to me that she's thinking strategically. So right now, the purpose of this oligarchy tour is for, in my view, Bernie Sanders to retire, to transfer whatever support he has to AOC. AOC is his designated successor. That makes sense for both of them. Yeah. He is probably too old to run again or to be a significant spokesperson for his movement for a long time in the foreseeable future. I mean, he's still energetic now. I'm not saying he's lost a step or anything, but it makes sense for him while he is still able to go out and rally to introduce AOC as his successor and try to transfer that to her. Will it be successful? It might. Will it mean she becomes the 2020 nominee? I don't think it's impossible by any stretch of the imagination, especially because the Dems are in, I mean, this is like a trope, but Dems in disarray, man.
Oh, yeah.
What are they?
Yeah, they don't have a brand, so.
They have no brand. Their leadership is pathetic and stupid.
I think that's what it comes
craven.
Down to. The point of.
They have no one.
It's not just they have no one, they have nothing to, like, what did Trump do? Trump built a coalition.
Yeah.
They built a coalition of city Republicans, rural Republicans, people who are just mad about pronoun culture, and people who are mad about illegal immigration. Everybody and anybody who was against anything liberal / progressive, they rallied for Trump regardless of what they thought of him.
Yeah.
I don't think the other side has that, messiah to rally around. AOC is good, but she's obviously left of center to the left of center, and I don't think the blue dog Democrat Chuck Schumer guy will ever come around her.
Well, they hate coalitions.
There's that too. Yeah, I think that's like a temperamental
Trump
thing.
likes coalitions enough. Trump has Democrats in his cabinet.
Yeah.
Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. I mean, honestly, the way he handled RFK Jr. is kind of an older version of politics that worked very effectively. Like, right, this is someone who is very much from outside my standard political coalition, but we have some overlap in terms of support, and I'm going to, in exchange for his support, reward him with a cabinet position. And a lot of, pro-life conservatives were really mad about it. Even some business libertarian conservatives were really mad about it. But it was like, well, this guy gave me his support, dropped out, endorsed me, and now he gets a reward for doing so. It's hard to imagine Democrats doing anything like that. Well, there's exactly one kind of Republican they are willing to work with. Cheney.
Yeah.
Right? That's the only is the that doesn't bring anything into the coalition. It doesn't help at all. And it still makes them uncomfortable. You can tell that Rachel Maddow still doesn't love sitting next to the woman.
Coalition-wise, what do you think happens to the Trump coalition right now? Because you brought up Elon previously. Obviously, there's a fracture right now post-Wisconsin. Like, let's stay on Elon for a second. Post-tariffs and post-Wisconsin, what do you think his future looks like in Washington?
Well, his time as a special government employee is coming to a close, so I think he's going to be less hands-on in, the details of government to the extent he was even very familiar with them in the first place. But I think the Elon demise narrative is a little too
overplayed. Yeah,
is what people want because he has made himself quite unpopular among everyone except hardcore Republicans, and even half the Trump administration is fighting with him every day because he's an extreme guy. He's a character. Yeah. But as far as I can tell, Trump does like him.
Okay,
that Trump has affection for him and appreciates what he has done for him. I presume he will continue to be a very, very significant backer of Trump's agenda in terms of being the head of X, the most important distribution platform for the MAGA message.
Yeah.
I guess he's not going to be, at the White House, literally being in all sorts of meetings and everything. But I don't think he's going to disappear from the political scene. I could be wrong. I have no idea. He could be. The last we hear of him is tomorrow. That just doesn't seem.
Also, I actually respect the fact that he still vocally spoke up, kind of, sort of, against tariffs. I know what your views on tariffs are, and obviously what happened post Liberation Day. It was funny because the last time we talked about it was like weeks before Liberation Day, and obviously we all know what happened since then. Do you think there will be a soft rollback, or like what do you think happens after this 90-day pause?
So it looks to me like no one in the administration, with the single exception of Peter Navarro, who I don't have a lot of respect or esteem for, doesn't want tariffs.
Yeah.
And so they were just trying to find a way to like convince Trump that we're doing tariffs in order for there to be no tariffs.
Yeah.
The point of the tariffs is to actually make us all stand down and not have tariffs. Or maybe just tariffs with like a slight China national security framing. That was the more thoughtful defense of it.
Yeah.
But then you did have some people in the coalition, like Peter Navarro, who's like, no, we're going to do tariffs forever so that everything costs a lot more, so that we'll rebuild all the factories in America like 20 years from now, which was just, I'm sorry, that was never going to happen. That's just not going to happen.
Can I just give the
There was
spiel
not
again?
enough, there wasn't political will to do this for 3 days, let alone 20 years. I mean, this is and I think we talked about this a little bit last time. I know that some people in the Trump coalition really want that. I know that part of his base is blue-collar workers who feel left behind by the new economy, who have suffered because of outsourcing, offshoring, all those things. I am not at all dismissing their concerns, and that there might be real ways to help them economically, or if we can build things in this country if we make it more cost efficient to do so, in terms of relaxing ridiculous environmental restrictions are the first to go. The NEPA, the kind of just utterly absurd environmental impact report type things. You have to like do a commune with nature for years before you're allowed to build anything.
Yeah.
You have to consider the impact on the little tapeworm of the valley or whatever. It's so insane. This is why we cannot build anything. So I'm all for getting rid of all of that.
Yeah.
And then we can build things here and we can have more jobs. That's fine. So if we're doing it by getting government out of the way, I support it. And most of the more national conservatives I have arguments with, well, they agree with me on that. They're like, well, we should get rid of those things. Like, okay, but if we got rid of those things, then we might get most of the way there. If instead we're going to have more manufacturing here by making everything so much more expensive to buy elsewhere that you have to do it here, that's just going to have like a crippling effect on the economy, as we already saw.
Can we go into like the arguments line item by line item? Because one of the biggest argument once the stock market started free falling was that, stock market is like a populist argument, and I totally get it, that it doesn't matter because only rich people own stocks. Not realizing that if the stock market goes down, companies don't have liquidity and they can't hire people, and are rich or poor, a lot of people have this thing called 401ks, which gets affected if the stock market is down.
They sounded like leftists when they were making that argument.
Oh my God,
like, it's just rich
doesn't
people
matter.
losing money. I'm like, okay, but the whole point is, no, we want the economy to grow robustly. We want more wealth generally in the society, because while you can
what do you
make
think is the sentiment though? I try to understand like what is the sentiment which drives like whatever, like it only affects rich people and we are against it. What is that energy? Because that is one of the more dominant energy across the country, no matter you press the red button or the blue button come election day.
There is a real perception among people on the right as well as the left. There's always been the case on the left, but it is on the right too, that everything has gotten worse over time. Everything has gotten that you have less access to material goods. That houses cost way too much, food prices are way too high. Even as it is the case that we become a wealthier society. So then the left answer to this is, well, it's because the people at the top are hoarding all that wealth. Is the prosperity, the increase in prosperity has all been captured by elites, and so that's why you're not seeing any of it. That's the way they resolve that conundrum. I would respond to that conundrum by saying, well, aspects of that are just not correct. Like if you actually, there's so much romanticizing of the past, but if you actually look at it, like the average American's home is larger. The average American family owns more cars than the average American family did in the 1950s. The massive decrease in the price of consumer electronics is something people roll their eyes when you hit, but Go back and try to live in the 1970s without the technology we have now, without how cheap flat screen TVs are and how everything from how advanced your refrigerator is now to compare. Like, those are the things you just discount because you don't remember what it was to live back at that time.
And now the obvious pushback to that is, but we don't give a shit since we can't afford housing and healthcare.
Right. So, but then I look at the things that have gotten most unaffordable relative to the way they used to be. Right, it's housing in cities.
Yeah.
You can move out to the great interior of the country,
Yeah.
and you can still buy
Yeah.
a gigantic mansion cheaper than you ever could have ever.
Yeah.
Like you can. You
Yeah.
just can't do it in New York, and you
Yeah.
can't do it in California. I have family. They live in the great state of Michigan. I'm from the
Yeah.
great state of Michigan. Live in the west side of the state, Grand Rapids area. They live like kings there, and it's not because they're like so absurdly wealthy. It's because it's affordable to live there.
Yeah.
So if you broaden your horizons a little bit, but then I also look at how basically the things that the government has been most involved in trying to regulate or manage are the things that have gotten the most expensive: housing, education, healthcare. And I think regulation gets in the way. I mean, the way it happens in housing, we're all aware of, right? Is that there's just artificial restrictions on how much you can build. In California, this is lethal. Everything from height caps on building new apartments, how high the buildings can be. That hurts us in D.C.
Yeah.
That's why it's so expensive to live in D.C. You can't have a building
Taller than
the Washington Monument or whatever. I think it has to be half as tall.
Speaking of housing, I was actually stoked when Derek Thompson and Ezra Klein wrote Abundance.
Oh, for sure.
Because for the first time, I was like, okay, here's someone from the left who is not just yelling orange men bad, and here's like an actual prognostic read on what liberals can do to actually give a shit about the country and the states where they live. And especially the argument they were making was that liberals no longer can claim to be the working class party if people in their states cannot afford their state, cannot afford to live there, and also are moving out to the red states. What do you think happens to all of that phenomenon right now, given the fact that the country is such a swing territory?
I think their book is brilliant. It's pointing to a lot of problems that I discuss and my colleagues at Reason Magazine. It's libertarian stuff about how difficult it is to build. That exact environmental impact difficulty is something that they probe as well. Now, is what they're talking about going to be? It seems to be. Unfortunately, I think it's being received well by like Democratic elites.
Yeah.
And that's never a place you want to be.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's in the
that's not
desk
how they want
of
it to be
Schumer.
received.
No.
They want it to be received by people. It's not being received well by left populists very well, I don't think, because they see this as kind of a stealth neoliberal agenda. And
sneak it in. Yeah.
And look, the point in their favor that they have, that like the left populists have, that they can kind of say they're right about is, well, look, we just ran the playbook of Ezra Klein and Matt Iglesias. And it was not politically popular, right? That Kamala Harris's policies are broadly in line with what the abundance type people want. Now, maybe the abundance people would turn around and say, no. Here's our 8,000 page plan for how we would run that campaign differently. But it certainly wasn't a campaign run by Bernie Sanders type people. So they're probably thinking, well, when is it ever our turn? You keep not succeeding with your mission. So why would we do the abundance thing? Why would that be politically popular? Again, I don't know if it'll be politically popular. I think it's correct.
Yeah.
I don't know that it will win, or if it makes sense for where the Democratic Party is.
So are we back to square one where like the consulting class, the DNC consulting class will be obsessed by all things abundance, whereas the base would be talking about AOC and Bernie?
I 100% bet that's what will happen. Yep. I mean, it comes back to that every time. They can't get both. They can't get the charisma of the individual, the genuine affection that the masses have for a Bernie Sanders type person, and then the agenda that would be
and the policy.
Better and sane of the more James Carville type centrists or whatever. Although James Carville and David Hogg have been feuding, and it's like
what's that about?
Well, and it's like they're both. Well, you're both wrong.
I saw the
Hogg
thing,
right.
yeah.
So David Hogg is like, well, he wants to primary Democrats in safe districts, and then the Democratic Party is like freaked out. Like, what are you doing? Spend that money on fighting Republicans. But David Hogg, who I don't like or agree with or think has necessarily any good political instincts, is nevertheless correct that the Democratic Party is run by entrenched older people who will never yield power, who would rather die in office, who don't know how to win elections, who have not figured out a strategy for beating Trump, and will never put down the crown. And that's got to be frustrating. So I hear him on that. I just don't think his ideas are better.
What do you think as of now a post-Trump RNC looks like?
Post-Trump? Haven't you seen the 2028 hat? I don't know what is this post-Trump nonsense?
No, he's saying.
No, I actually don't think that. I think post-Trump, it's just Vance, and it's kind of similar.
Do you think Vance is copy-paste, or do you think like there's a tinge to that populism?
Well,
Because he does have that Thiel backing, so that's a whole different world.
Yeah, it could be a little different. I mean, it could be that he follows through with greater determination on some of the policies that Trump kind of is sort of on board with, but Trump's not a policy-oriented guy. So this could be both good and bad from my perspective. I could see J.D. Vance persisting on a tariff kind of thing because he actually does ideologically believe in them, and he cares about rebuilding working factory towns, that kind of thing. Even if it does hurt the economy overall, he might be ideologically committed to that. So that would be not a good thing. On the other hand, he also seems ideologically committed more so to the America First foreign policy vision. Like that emerged in that Signal chat. You know, everyone's so obsessed with that it's like that the format is what they're mad about. And I'm like, can we talk about the actual policy for 5 seconds? Can we actually talk about, I mean, this was good. I was glad to see that the vice president and the defense secretary were having a disagreement and a discussion about whether we should bomb the Houthis. And Vance raised what I thought were very good points. So on foreign policy, that this might be the America First MAGA agenda actually implemented with greater ideological consistency, because Vance really does seem to adhere to it, and behind the scenes even was pushing it. There's something going on right now, by the way, in the Pentagon where like I think all the America First people are being pushed
Booted,
out or blamed for leaking.
There's like this whole credibility issue going on right now, right from the outside. All things Pete Hegseth and Signal chat. It's the Vietnam era term of like, once Americans realize that you don't have credibility because the way you're executing, it's not even a policy discussion, just the way you're executing is floppy, ergo the policy behind it is bad.
But I think the media, the mainstream media, is focusing on the execution so much that it's actually a bit insane to me that there's comparatively little focus on whether we're going to have a war with Iran now. Like that is what's happening behind the scenes. Is
that's
the
the
people
issue.
who want a more hawkish posture toward Iran, who are more okay with open conflict with Iran, and who maybe want to give the government of Israel what it wants and actually bomb the nuclear facilities of Iran. Those people are behind the scenes somehow managing to push out of the administration people who are more in a populist and libertarian America First coalition. There is a background ideological conflict happening that, unfortunately, I think that my side is not winning. And that is getting zero attention because it's all about Pete Hegseth's comedies, because the media just loves the, oh my God, they put somebody in a Signal chat that it was a media person. We get to be the main character.
It is good TV though. It is good TV though.
It's good TV, but it's just like, can we for 5 seconds talk about the much more consequential aspect of this, which is whether we're going to have war with Iran.
What do you make of Pete Hegseth as of now? Because like the whole argument, because I know we are talking about character right now, but it matters given the fact that it is as consequential as, like you said, Iran. So how do you think he has handled all of this?
I mean, I don't like that I don't really know what his views are on the subject. I don't know which faction he is more partial to. I don't know if he's aware of that this conflict is going on, or why he's decided to get rid of people who have sworn, like Dan Caldwell, who was interviewed on Tucker Carlson and said, I was not responsible for any of these leaks. He could be not telling the truth about that, but he has gone on the record and said he was not responsible for any of this. And that what's happening is Hegseth and the department are getting overrun by neocon type people. And I don't see any evidence that Hegseth is fighting back against that. If he is, he should, I don't know, more publicly proclaim that, or try to make common cause with those of us who want that to be the case. So maybe it's a basic competency issue, and obviously it came up at his confirmation hearing that maybe he did not have enough experience running an organization of this size. Although the experience argument that's always going to end up benefiting the most entrenched,
the boomers,
the
Lindsey Grahams of the world.
Well, right. The people who want war the most.
Yeah.
That's why you can't just say, oh, I want the most expert person. COVID, foreign policy, whatever it is. Well, the most expert people are some of the ones who got all this stuff the most wrong of all. Now, I don't think you should dismiss expertise every single time. Again, it's another case of the dial doesn't have to go to 11, where we must always and every time elevate the crankiest or most contrarian person. But it is worth hearing out contrarians, hearing out experts, and making independent judgments. I don't know why that's so hard to do both.
on the expert point, like one of the bigger reasons I was leaning more towards the right come last year because Trump's affiliation with all things tech right and people like Mark Andreessen and the Elon Musks of the world. However, post-election, it feels like, and I don't know how else to put it, they have been just Trump loyalist and quote-unquote brought down to everything that Trump is about, instead kind of bringing him to talk more about issues like abundance and what have you. Are you happy with how the tech rights marriage has played into the MAGA movement?
Well,
in hindsight,
it seems like they exerted some level of influence on him to not do the tariffs till the end of time in a very bad way.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing.
Yeah.
There was the H-1B visa fight initially that the tech right seems to have won. So I don't know if they're sitting around and saying, oh my God, I can't believe we backed this guy. We've got nothing. This is such a disaster. I think probably they're saying, well, we're not getting everything we wanted, but it would have been worse if Democrats, well, what's the alternative?
Yeah.
The Democrats, I don't believe, are ever going to play nice with these people. I don't see what incentive they have to ever go back the other way. I mean, ever is a big word. Things could change. The parties have totally switched what their positions are in the last 100 years. So I don't know what it'll be in another 100 years. But right now, I still think tech right people have to be looking at the Democratic Party as the party that's going to do, that is way more dedicated to antitrust, which is the big thing. And even content moderation and free speech violations and investigating your companies and all that stuff is going to be worse under Democrats. So I don't think they're saying, oh, yeah, we backed the wrong horse by any stretch of the imagination.
I'm going to ask you this question again because this is the one issue that I care about the most vis-a-vis free speech. And let's give like a prescriptive answer. How should one follow through with deportation measures while being protective of rule of law and free speech?
Well, you should have a process.
Yeah.
You shouldn't just grab people off the street and send them to detention facilities. It is true that people who are here on visas or here illegally are not necessarily entitled to the same protections for speech and for being here that American citizens are. That doesn't mean they're entitled to nothing.
Yep.
If they didn't commit other crimes, I don't see what the argument necessarily is for deporting them. If the thing they did is just speech that would be legal, that would be inarguably legal if they were a citizen, I don't think they should be deported. I don't see the argument for why we should do that. For the activist students. If it's right, if I wrote an op-ed, I could write an op-ed saying Hamas is right. I hope Hamas defeats Israel. And you couldn't do anything about it. I couldn't be arrested for it. I could suffer professional consequences. I could be fired. Couldn't be jailed. There could be no legal consequences for that. So given that's the case, I have a hard time.
And you think that right should be extended to non-citizens?
Yes. This is important. The First Amendment does not say, here is a class of people who have this right. The First Amendment says the government shall make no law.
Yeah.
It is a restriction on what the government does.
It's not giving you a right.
It's not saying these are the people. It's saying this government cannot do this, and this being restrict speech. So even if it's a non-citizen speech, again, the restriction is on the government, not It's not a
It's
positive,
not a positive
right?
right.
It's a
protection.
constraint on government, and constraints on government are beautiful things.
Yeah.
They are good things. They protect all of us. I have never. I was always. One of the things that turned me into a libertarian was slippery slope arguments.
Let's go.
I think a lot of people roll their eyes at slippery slope arguments, but they're always correct. We know, don't we know, that you give the government an inch, they'll take a mile?
Can you give an example of a hypothetical slip and slope, which is COVID? Let's stay on that.
Yeah, COVID is a great case. So, school closures, how about that? So we normalized shutting down the schools for COVID-related reasons. There's too many cases. We got to close the schools. And then there were tons of school districts that then started, after that was normalized, now they'll shut schools down for any reason, for something that happens in the state. Oh, there's not enough people. We'll just have remote learning now, because remote learning is no worse, right? We're ready to do remote learning. It's not like this was an emergency during COVID. We'll never do anything like this again. It's like, no, this will be the new normal. We'll just do virtual school, even though virtual school fails, kid after kid after kid. We have the evidence that it does not work. It works for some highly motivated students who would do fine under any environment. For most people, it's a disaster. And yet schools were like, that was the new normal. Now we'll just close schools for any reason.
And that's a slippery slope argument. Can you close the loop on how something like slippery slope arguments should not be used as a cudgel against the fundamentals of free speech?
What do you mean?
Like the slippery slope argument, people use that to say that, okay, now the government has abused their power. Now the right right now is saying that, okay, it's our time to abuse said power, and that's the prevalent sentiment regarding the right. They did it, now it's our time to do it.
Right. Well, why? Well, the government could use this power to persecute conservative speech. They already have. They persecuted conservative speech on social media. Now that got exposed, and the companies would not go along with that again. And also we can shut down their power to do that if it's government. We can say, and I agreed with this, is an executive order that Trump issued that I agree with. He issued an executive order clarifying to federal agencies that they are not to communicate with social media companies and instruct or imply or suggest that they should take down speech. That's fine. We can restrict government action. We should not restrict private action. Another great example of the slippery slope that it just occurred to me and that pertains to this question. So when the government was explaining why the Columbia student Mahmoud Khalil, when they were justifying grabbing and detaining this person for his speech, initially what they said, they described it as that this was pro-Hamas speech or protesting, and then it was just anti-Israel speech in the next explanation. Okay. And then later, it was just protesting. They said that was their last explanation. Well, we wouldn't have let someone come to the country if we knew they were going to be protesting. Like, wait a minute. First you said this was pro-Hamas. Now you see how that moves down? Well, now we welcome protesting. You're allowed to protest. That's what the First Amendment protects. So I don't trust the government to make these distinctions at all anymore. If you're engaged in violence, crime, we've litigated speech questions at the Supreme Court for 100 years, and we've gotten pretty good at it, right? The court has drawn really clear distinctions that First Amendment scholars, or really even anyone who has read through the court cases, can tell you this is protected speech and this is not. This is incitement to violence. This is defamation. This is whatever the other couple categories are, and everything else is fine. This could be, a harassment of a pervasive nature that would get you in trouble in the workplace, so that's not protected. We've carved out we have some pretty clear lines. I don't know why the government would be wanting to blur them. I don't see who that benefits except the government.
The ends shall not justify the means.
The ends shall not justify. We gotta care about the means. And I'm not some naive. Again, I sound so libbish today. I am not naive.
Libified to the
I
bones
know the
today.
left does not recognize. This is the right's response. But the left does not recognize these boundaries, Robby. No. They're just out to win at all cases. They don't care. We must do what they do, or we're gonna get beaten. And my response is that's not true. We don't have to do what they're going to do. We have the government now. We could pass laws that restrict government behavior that would make it so the weapons, when the weapons are back in the Democratic Party's hands, as we know they will be, that the weapons will be blunt. We can make the weapons blunt right now. We have an unprecedented moment in time to do that, or we can sharpen the weapons. They are sharpening the weapons right now. They are sharpening the little spears and little axes. It's not good. Don't do that. Simple. Don't do it. Blunt them. Blunt the swords. Blunt the spears. And next time Democrats are in charge, things will be better for our liberties. Or just, I guess you can expect to win forever, but that's a very naive hope, especially when you do things that prove to be immediately damaging to your political project. I mean, if the Trump strategy or the MAGA strategy is to win elections forever, well, then you can't wreck the economy every other week. Your approval ratings will just go down. If the strategy is to win forever, then you better make this the best economy that has ever been, and keep prices low and do really smart things on that front, or it's just obvious that Democrats are going to be back in power at one of the levels, maybe not the presidency, but the House or whatever it is.
The thing is, you can do that and also make the weapons blunt at the same time.
Yeah. Let's do it all. Let's have a great economy. Let's have unchecked prosperity because we've unleashed American tech sectors to be the greatest and most successful companies. Let's build things here where it makes sense to do it. Let's make it cheaper to build things here if we can get regulation out of the way. Or else let's look for smart trading partners around the globe who want to share in America's prosperity and benefit us and we benefit them, that are aligned with our values and our national security concerns. If that means being wary of China, that's fine. Let's do that, and let's keep prices low, and let's have a great economy, and let's have some sanity. And Republicans might actually keep winning, but they can't help themselves sometimes.
Robby Soave, thank you.
My pleasure.